we go. So that's all right. Thank you very much for your time, Brian, and make sure you do keep me on track. And it's great to talk with all of you. So I'm Erin Saffel, Arizona State Climatologist for Arizona. And I've been the state climatologist for about 3 years, which is enough to really understand what our needs are and how we can help. We've had a state climatologist in Arizona since 1973, but there's still things that we need to improve, that we need to accomplish, that we need to do. So you might have heard me talk yesterday. I talked a little bit about context. I really think that's what the state climatologist can provide. We look at all of these millions of pieces of data, the temperature, the precipitation, but what does it really mean? I talked about trends in my side note yesterday. So it's those kinds of ideas that we can bring, that context. And so I want to kind of give you a little bit of an overview about what our office does, just a little bit. We do wear a lot of hats, like Brian mentioned. We all do. And I think it's very helpful to bring that information to the community. For our office, we interact with the government a lot, with our government agencies. So that's looking at cities, counties, states, federal agencies. We contribute to things like the FEMA hazard mitigation plans for the counties, for the communities, the tribal communities, for the state. We look at those emergency management plans. We look at heat plans. And this one might be unique. I thought this might be interesting for the folks to understand. We also assist when we're dealing with the county sheriffs investigating homicides. We assist with those kinds of things as well. So we perform outreach for K through 12 students. Here's one of the things that we did for Sedona in Arizona, a very small community. Most folks are aware of where Sedona is, kind of central Arizona, but a very small community. And we were fortunate to be able to take advantage of the Kapanihis Urban Heat Island Mapping Plan last year. And you can see that even in our small communities, you're going to have the urban heat island, which impacts people differently in the area. And we're very, very grateful for the Drought Learning Network to help us connect with our tribal communities. That really helps them identify important resources. I hope we can continue that, maybe having annual meetings. Arizona's drought, we've been looking at Arizona's drought for about 20 years, but really it started in 1999 and then 2007 with drought emergencies, and then a drought declaration from our state governors to have us evaluate what's going on with drought, not just every year, but looking at every 3 months and reporting out to our state governor what the status of our long-term drought is in the state. Our office has set the start of our most recent drought as 1994. So we have been in drought since that period of time. And evaluating that, you can see some of the ways that we evaluate that, looking at the average SPI, average SPEI, going back 24, 36, 48 months. So we do those kinds of things to understand what's going on with our current long-term drought in Arizona in the state. And then our office, what we try and do is communicate and educate to a lot of different groups. So we try and reach as many people as possible. Our website is active. We encourage everyone to come on over. It helps teach people things about Arizona's weather and climate, things like the urban heat island, things that they understand about drought. We have a monthly webinar, and we focus on current conditions and outlooks, and then we record it and put it on YouTube. One of the most popular is looking at our monsoon season, kind of where we stand. We look at the outlook and we look at what happened. So I encourage folks to go take a look at that YouTube. So we use social media to help to communicate this information, to bring this information out there, to advance that. And we get really interesting questions from the general public as a result. So that's a little bit of a heads up about what I do here in the office, what we do, and thank you for your time.
All right, do we have any questions for Arizona from anyone in the group? We can put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. I guess I do have a question for you, Ariane. With regards to the Drought Learning Network and even with resource managers, I imagine that water managers are probably some of your biggest connections within the state. But are there other resource managers uh, that you are directly dealing with, or that comes to the state climate office for help or assistance, at least through your tenure?
It's an amazing thing. The Arizona Department of Water Resources, so that's a state level arena, really does kind of connect and bring folks together. So we have an amazing director for the state there, and that kind of brings all of us together. I think that would better portray that structure.
Very good. Any other questions from? Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to Dave Dubois in New Mexico. Dave, the floor is yours.
All right, let me queue up what I got here. Let me put it on full screen. There we go. Found the right button. Okay. It's gonna give you a kind of a perspectives from where we are here in New Mexico. Um, what I do, I'm the state climatologist. I'm also part of the faculty at NMSU, and then I run statewide weather station network. We call that ZMAT, and we'll be talking about some of the resource managers that we work with. I'm just putting this together last night, trying to think of all the great people we've been working with, and and sometimes there's a regular contact with folks, and sometimes they're just kind of one-off things, and maybe one-off things. Some occasionally they lead into regular contact. So um, as we do, related to this annual meeting, we work with drought stakeholders and some of the resource managers. It's a great list of people in our drought monitoring. They work with us on a monthly basis, and then we've got folks just like that. Let me highlight my little laser pointer here, and then the weather service is there's sort of a in a way a resource manager, kind of working as an inter disciplinary inter area agency, both Albuquerque and El Paso. Those are kind of where we work a lot with, and we kind of work together on some things, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then kind of recently with the water agencies, there's a lot of activity going on. They're putting together a 50-year water plan, and I'll mention some of that, but there's a lot of discussions, and we've had interactions, and even had some tours at some of our weather stations that are a key part of their planning and keying off the data. And of course, private ranchers. We'll mention some about indigenous government agencies, the tribal office, as well as Department of Health is another resource manager helping out with human health and environmental health. And then there's a whole other group, state legislators that they've somehow found all my contact information, including my private cell, which is fine. And so I get random texts from folks and kind of helping out as needed, answer questions, and as well as kind of like what Aaron mentioned, local government, kind of like the Kappa. We did that as well, and then there's been a couple other agency where they worked with in mapping out heat in the urban areas. Another great group, resource managers, is different folks at our Department of Agriculture or state level. And then just recently, we've been getting a lot of interactions with the National Park Service entities here in the state. They've had some extreme weather events, both hot and flooding and lightning and things like that really we've been kind of talking a lot. And then there's this other group, the soil and water conservation districts, that we've been learning more about, and there's a lot of folks there, and it's statewide, so it's really good make some connections. And so I was going to give you some examples. A lot of it is more providing information, real time as well as post event. We know what kind of information can you provide? That's the kind of questions. Things, everything from high intensity events, everything from drought, flooding, high winds, heat, wildfires. Those are kind of the top of the list that rise up in terms of what kind of stuff that they ask for. And then things like during the emergencies, getting information out and making sure that we have the right information. Those don't occur very often, but when they do, it's sort of, we need to provide that right away. And then just more in the kind of helping with their plans, resource planning, and special projects they've had to kind of get them off the ground. And then things, other parts of that, especially with private ranchers and the folks who are affected by drought, is just getting the right information, drought decision making, and then helping out, kind of getting the information out to, say, the U.S. Drought Monitor, for example. And then so like it's serving on science and review documents, like with the state engineers and Interstate Stream Commission. That was that part of that 50-year water plan. That was kind of it took several months to kind of walk on that. And then there's just kind of tons of presentations, kind of can you speak on this? That kind of all year round, and it's changing. And I'm always available to speak at committee, legislative committee meetings and things. And I never know what to expect sometimes, and just got to be there at the meeting and be there to answer questions on anything from drought, climate change impacts, outlooks, and what do you think about the next 3 years? Things like that. And some specific things I'll not spend a lot of time here, but things like the usual things are like the outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. Usually we've talked to them a lot. They usually don't ask about the really long term, but usually the 1 to 3 months is usually what they're looking for. The current drought maps, and not necessarily just the maps, but their interpretation and how we get there, how we got there, and why do you think that we went from there to there to that, and then how going in and out of drought. Those are really tough questions to answer, but they're kind of walk people through that. And then there's been a lot of really interesting information over time. People want really high resolution data. We recently moved from hourly to 5-minute, and folks actually want even more frequent, like 1-minute data. It's like, wow, okay, so that's kind of a resource planning for us, is how can we reach out to those. And then there's long-term forecasts going out, and they say what's the next 3 years going to look like. Those are tough questions from the climate perspective, because we have keys to help us for seasonal climate, but not for something out. We have tools that go out to 30 years, but then there's that intermediate, which is a tough one. And then things like impacts, range conditions, soil moisture. We try to do our best to provide that. And then pressure to get more indicators. How can I use this? And how can we leverage this? And why can't you use this? And it's more of more rangelands things. So those are kind of some of the specific things. And I'll end with so how the question was asked. How can the drought learning network assist with some of these? I think it's these forums are really good. I think if we can expand the reach. For instance, like the indigenous group, we had a workshop a little while back. I think it was the summer, I think, and which engaged a lot of folks, and we had really good discussions. And I know it's a lot of work to put those together, but I think they're really good. Maybe even smaller ones, some that could be done, and then maybe some specific product trainings at the commodity meetings, or even published in their newsletters. There's like the Cattlemen's Association, there's other growers associations, and it's we've gotten invited to those, and maybe there's some ways that the Drought Learning Network could contribute to those and be part of that. And then I was thinking of getting more youth involved in the process, because we have a lot of, as a land grant university, and several others, including Nebraska, is there's involvement in, say, FFA and 4-H, and involving the kids, schools, which I think will be good idea. Developing things and how to talk through these things and projects to get them and get the families involved as well. And the last thing I'll mention is um, kind of a thing I think I mentioned before is, I think that the Drought Learn Network should remain as a trusted conduit, provide the information. And I think it's an encouragement to this community to keep on going and provide that whatever needs to get done to be a trusted source of information for the drought community. And I think I'll stop there.
No, that's excellent, Dave. Does anyone have any questions for Dave? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Dave, this is Pete over here at Navajo Region.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, so I've been looking at ZMET current conditions and the listing of sites that are monitored.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to associate the number of the sites with the station list and or summary data. How do I do that? I hope that's not too much for this session.
No, it's well, I mean, we're working on, we've got a map interface on the weather.nmsu.edu/ZMet. So if you're at a computer, it doesn't work on the cell phone because it's hard to do mapping on cell phones.
I'm
So
at a computer.
yeah,
I'm
so if you
on,
do that URL/ZMet, there's a map, and then so you can zoom in kind of like you do with Google. And then as we're not finished with the network yet. We've got a lot of work to do to
I,
get them online. So that we'll be putting them online as we get them, as I visit them and put SIM cards and things on.
yeah, if you could make them hot on the map, that would be great.
Yep. That's my intent, is to get them online and ready to go as they are. I've got the sensors are on, they're collecting data, but I just have to go out and visit and put SIM cards in, which
Right,
it's another trip.
right.
So
Thank you.
Hey, Dave,
yeah.
one more question came in, and I think Emily was reading my mind when she shared this. She goes, Dave, you mentioned product trainings at commodity meetings. Is there a
Mhm.
specific product that you are thinking about sharing?
I think it's what is our main thing that we are developing as a network. I mean, like, I haven't been keyed on the other the subgroups, but like I remember when you guys rolled out the grass cast, as just an example, you know getting feedback and say, here's this resource, and it could be a 5-minute presentation or a one pager to put in their newsletter, and then have a feedback email, say, hey, what do you think about this? Is it any good? Is it real life? That kind of thing, and it could be other things. Like, I know you guys are doing the case studies. Maybe there's a one pager case study that you could provide as a at the commodity meeting, kind of really talk through it real quick. And then if more information, go to this other, wherever you need to put up, website or email. That's kind of my initial ideas. I haven't really flushed it all out, but that's kind of where I was thinking.
I also liked your comment about involving youth. I'm, being at a land grant as well. We see the annual meeting always arrive at our campus every year, and the kids walking around in their blue coats with FFA and definitely through 4-H. And that really got my wheels spinning. Is how are some of these messages that we want to bring to people through the DLN? How could we involve the youth in those, and especially if they have their annual meetings or annual get-togethers at state levels? That's something that we as a DLN can definitely investigate, and I really like that idea. So thanks for bringing that up. And if anyone else has anything else for Dave, put it in the chat. We should have a few minutes at least at the end of this to answer some of those, but we'll go on to John in Utah. John, if you want to take the stage, it's yours. We see your slides, John, but we don't hear you if you are talking.
My apologies, Brian. I'll restart my introduction. Yeah, after so many years of Zoom, we still struggle to get through some of this stuff. But anyway, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. My name is John from the Utah Climate Center, and I now have the challenge of following Dave's excellent presentation that gave, I think, a very wonderful overview of what a lot of the region's climate center activities look like from week to week. Just aimed at our specific state's focus. So thanks, Dave, for that wonderful overview. And Aaron was looking at a lot of the stuff on your slides, thinking, oh, yeah, that would be great to talk about too. So I'll try to keep it brief and keep it sort of a top level discussion for what our state climate office has been up to. All right, so I think at this point it's safe to say that a lot of our engagement and interactions are occurring over Zoom. So I thought I'd just list who we Zoom with most frequently through sort of a pyramid structure here. We engage with, just like as Dave was talking about, lots of our state and local levels of resource managers and stakeholders. At the local level, we are all the way down to the individuals, looking at agricultural producers, and above them, the farm service agencies, and then above them, extension agents sharing information to their specific region. At the state level, like I think probably most of the state climate offices, were engaged with the Division of Water Resources and Natural Resources. Inside of that is bundled in with forest managers and lots of the range managers as well. We do have some unique engagement with Department of Transportation, looking at things like rain on snow events, and they're curious and interested about flooding impacts and resource deployment ahead of potential flooding events for highways and the transportation infrastructure. We do episodically engage with the state engineer, looking at safety design criterias, water management, infrastructure plans, specifically with climate impacts and climate trends looking forward. We also engage quite a bit with the Division of Environmental Quality, or air quality. The state of Utah suffers greatly during the wintertime during winter inversions, where our valleys collect pollution for up to several weeks at a time. And we can look like some of the infamous Asian cities where you can't see 50 feet in any direction thanks to the air pollution. So we offer inversion prediction tools, which has, I think, greatly focused a lot of attention on our website and weather data prediction level. At the university level, obviously, we're tied to Utah State University, and so we have the academic engine that we can occasionally tap into. Recently, in the last several years, the state has sort of condensed and distilled the conduit of science information, specifically earth science and land management science. They've distilled the conduit where that information is passed from the science level to the policy level through the Institute for Land, Water, and Air, which is hosted at USU. And they have been charged with collecting and distilling a large amount of information that affects any of the state's resource planning into a single annual report that gets passed to the governor and is used to derive lots of short-term and long-term policy decision-making. So that's been a really nice conduit and resource to have at our disposal that makes it a little bit easier to pass scientific information up to the policymakers. At the federal level, the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, the National Weather Service, and National Resource Conservation Service are all very well engaged with probably the foundation of our resource information sharing, which is the State Drought Condition Monitoring webinar. I believe Laura Haskell is here with us right now, and she has been instrumental in organizing this statewide webinar and bringing in all of the subject matter experts connecting them with stakeholders on the ground that help ground truth the data. And so most of the things listed here are connected with that webinar, but we do have scheduled offline engagement. The National Weather Service is one area that we've grown quite a bit over the last several years, thanks to connections with that drought update webinar. And now we meet offline at least once a month to talk about seasonal outlooks and translating of seasonal conditions. And then, of course, like Dave mentioned, the episodic consulting that comes in once in a while from all sorts of different groups. So that's kind of our pyramid of engagement and the collection of resource managers. Just like Dave was mentioning, a majority of our engagement is aimed at providing seasonal outlooks through our lens of Utah's specific nuanced flavor of climate, as well as translating the diverse collection of outlooks and extended range predictions provided by all sorts of means. The Climate Prediction Center is usually the low-hanging fruit, and that helps the state with its short-term planning on a seasonal, maybe the yearly level. We also do quite a bit of climate change impacts and prediction level engagement to help the state and its resource managers and decision makers with their long-term planning. So very much similar to lots of points that Dave has made, so I won't continue to ramble about these. Tribal engagement is something that I feel has been one of the most beneficial aspects of what DLN has provided me specifically, but I think is also hitting on a lot of the initiatives that climate offices in the region are trying to build and grow. This is an area need that the Climate Center and other USU faculty that we partner with have identified as an area of need for the state. And so there have been efforts internally at the Climate Center and externally with USU faculty and extension collaborators to develop proposals and grants that will support the tribal engagement. Over the last couple of years, we've participated in invited talks and reoccurring virtual community conversations. Lots of sort of overview of the available data and the products and tools that we provide through the website, and some low-level training on how to access and interpret those. I feel we have quite a bit of room to grow in terms of the engagement and training and visibility and promotion of lots of our products. And that's some of the initiatives that we plan for the next several years. We're also a part of the DLN tribal engagement community. I think this has been the most important aspect of DLN's participation for me specifically. Just being a part of the network and meeting people and growing my community of fellow drought interested parties has been really beneficial, and DLN has been a nice conduit for that, for the tribal engagement aspect. One of the areas that we've really identified as the direction that we want to build the Utah side of things is to develop a model that empowers the tribal communities to maintain and manage their own mesonets, as opposed to asking for the keys to the car. From the Climate Center's point of view, we would prefer to engage and empower these communities to maintain and manage their own equipment and support and use of that data with guidance and support from the Climate Office and from both logistical and a scientific interpretation side, as well as resource support from the academic engines that we have available. And that has been an area that we've been working towards with conversations with some of our tribal extension agents and some of the communities there. This seems to be a model that would be most beneficial and efficient from all sides. Brian asked some of the challenges when it comes to tribal use and decision-making of drought products. And for Utah specifically, but probably in many other Western U.S. states, the observational network is just so sparse in so much of the area. It's not only in tribal regions, but an issue throughout Utah. It's exacerbated in tribal regions for several reasons, but the lack of just direct observations really handcuffs a lot of the interpretation and passing of data upstream. It's also fairly difficult to share real-time information. We have several tools that we've developed that are really helping with real-time situational awareness of drought impacts and water resource management and agricultural efforts. Those are usually disseminated over apps and cell phone signals. And so a lot of areas that don't have a great infrastructure of these do add additional challenges to getting that information out and usable. Also, as Dave noted, and I think everybody suffers the challenge of translating the data and the science from an academic point of view to a decision maker's level of understanding. Even for some of us high-level climate scientists, it's difficult to wade through the data density and interactions amongst all the different processes. So I can't imagine asking an end user, even with a small amount of training, to feel very confident in looking through some of our drought dashboard toolkits. So some of the areas of need going forward probably are continuing to build in this infrastructure of nice summaries and overviews from a subject matter expert that are distilled for the general public in a way that they can digest and make actions off of it. So for various reasons, I think the monitor, interpret, act model has some gaps that can be filled, specifically in the tribal community angle. And hopefully through those improvements, decision making at the tribal community level will improve. The next to last thing I'll talk about is what Brian asked about how DLN has been beneficial in their support. And I think back to some of my small business experience where a very powerful level of understanding is that your network is really what your net worth is built around. I like that saying a lot. And I think DLN has been really instrumental in helping specifically me as an early career scientist develop a network of fellow scientists and stakeholders that benefit the whole process of science and operational decision making. So I think that should be acknowledged, and how DLN's infrastructure and support has been beneficial to the state climate offices. DLN, I think, can continue to foster the working relationships that we're enjoying right now with these kinds of meetings and the offline committee meetings that we have periodically. Continuing to host and advocate and lobby for greater collaborative space, specifically in the tribal engagement side with funding support. We've struggled to get the funding support for lots of our projects that we would prefer to be getting off the ground, and so that's been a hurdle for us as well. Areas of funding support that I think we can identify as supporting sustainable mesonet expansion everywhere, but specifically in tribal lands. Sustainable is the key. Oftentimes, it's not a challenge to get the upfront capital. It's the biggest challenge is sustaining the maintenance, the calibration, and the support that these mesonets require for the long term. Oftentimes that might come from the state, but I think state and federal and local agencies are all going to be needed for that task. Soil moisture, boy, this is a huge limiting factor in how we address drought conditions. There are so much extrapolated information from a very limited number of data points that it's hard to have a high degree of confidence that our description of anything that's soil moisture or derivative of soil moisture is actually capturing the conditions on the ground. And then continuing to grow unified drought dashboards and in a way that that information is digestible by a general audience. I think that is a direction that all the state climate offices and groups like DLN can continue to focus on improving. We've made good strides, but there are still more to go. And then just a quick drought reflection for the state, since we can't ever not have a drought discussion here when we gather. Our reflections over the last year have been positive from a long-term drought recovery point of view. I'll show reservoirs here in a second, but you can see the time series of drought over the last about, I guess, 8 years now. We've had some pretty significant drought conditions spread across the state in recent years, but the last 2 years have done some wonderful things in terms of long-term drought recovery. And Unfortunately, the last couple of months, we've had some short-term drought pressure reemerge, and we have some expanded conditions of D0 and D1 across the state. But from a long-term point of view, our reservoirs are looking quite a bit better than they have in the past, and our soil moisture is the same way. And so short-term drought pressure is probably going to be buffered fairly well over the near term, thanks to the conditions of the long-term improvements. So that's kind of what I have right now, and I appreciate all the other state climate panelists being here. Rob Gillies, our state climatologist, is giving a talk right now in Salt Lake City and sends his regrets for not being able to attend and participate. And so I hope I've done a decent job of overviewing what we've been doing here in Utah. So thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. And in the essence of time, we're going to move right on to Baker in Nevada. And Baker, you can introduce yourself to the group. I know your appointment as a state climatologist has not even kind of dried the seal yet. So you can introduce yourself, and very glad you could participate and be here today.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate the invitation, Brian. And it's great to connect with some of the other fellow state climatologists on the call. So appreciate that. And just the rest of the team on here. As Brian mentioned, I'm literally brand new. I've only been on the job for a couple months now, since August, and still, of course, meeting a lot of people and learning a lot about the state and the responsibilities of state climatologist, and in particular about drought. I don't have that much background in drought. I've come from the east, from the Southern Appalachian Mountains, Appalachian State University, and have focused most of my work on precipitation and snow in particular in high mountain regions, and instrumentation more broadly. I've worked in the Himalaya and the Andes quite extensively. And so one of the immediate needs that I have learned about, not only across the Mountain West, but particularly in Nevada, is the sparseness of observational networks. And so I have begun coordinating right off the bat with different state agencies, and especially with the Western Regional Climate Center and SNOTEL, about thinking creatively about ways we may not only enhance existing networks, but look and expand to fill some of the voids. CocoRa's is a tremendous opportunity, I think, and there's a huge void in CocoRa's observations across Nevada. I've been a CocoRa's observer in North Carolina for almost 20 years, and also a co-op observer, so I have a real appreciation for the importance of these direct observations. Now, with respect to some of the coordination that I'm doing and interaction with resource managers, we benefit at the University of Nevada, Reno, for having a really strong extension program run out of the university. And so I've already been able to join and introduce myself to a webinar of state extension agents, and have had some really productive conversations following up from that. I have also, of course, been in pretty close communication with the Nevada Division of Water Resources, especially with respect to drought, with drought beginning, as we just heard, short-term drought really returning to much of the state. I've had some interaction already with emergency management, and also ranchers. So there's a pretty robust series of organizations across the state that are very interested in on the climate side, and so I plan to get out and make some site visits and build those relationships. I've mentioned the Western Regional Climate Center. Of course, it's based in Reno, and DRI, the Desert Research Institute. So I've had some very productive conversations with them. And the National Weather Service offices, of course, in Reno and also in Elko and in Las Vegas, have been super helpful. Just in the past week, I gave a presentation to our College of Science Board of Directors, which has a lot of representatives from the mining industry. So that's another group that I've been in touch with. And of course, the local government has been very involved in the Reno area. Our former interim state climatologist, Tom Albright, led a Kappa heat mapping campaign in Reno, and had strong support and interaction with the government, local government there. Now, I will share just a couple things to expand upon. And as part of this partnership with the Extension Office, again, this is a website and a product that I inherited. We have a really strong web presence. I think this is right on our website, Living with Drought, and it's something that was developed in conjunction with the Extension Office, and there are links to, I think, many of your products, and certainly opportunities to report conditions. And so that's a benefit. One thing I did want to just touch on, so one of the conversations I had really just 2 days ago was with an extension officer from Eureka, and I'd heard this from a couple other folks, and there are some real challenges in with BLM in particular, controlling stock density of how much ranchers can put on the land. And there, I think in this particular case, the local or regional BLM land manager has prioritized longer term drought indicators that maybe look at more of the hydrological impacts as opposed to the shorter term actual vegetative condition. And so there have been some real conflicts develop in parts of the state over how drought indicators are being used to make decisions about rangeland management. And so that's something I'm learning a lot about, and I'm sure many of you have had these conversations, but if there is some other discussion. And so I put this slide on here because this extension agent and the ranching community have found the DRI to be the most helpful product, and that matches on the ground perspectives from the rangeland perspective, but it's not always recognized or viewed favorably within some of the BLM folks. And so there's some real tension there. And again, I'd love to hear if anybody else has any more discussion or comment about that. And then, our office is putting out now monthly drought reports and also quarterly climate reports. And I'm learning a lot moving forward. So appreciate the time, and look forward to becoming more involved and a more informed participant moving forward as well.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Baker or any comments to anything that he said? As we do have a little bit of time before we go to our last panelist. You can unmute yourself or share in the chat. And Tanya did put in the chat a couple links to the Living with Drought and also the VegDry tool that Baker showed there on one of those last slides. Everyone's saying welcome to you, and yeah, I mean it one thing that's come up through everyone, and I kind of looked at the participants in our panel, the land grant universities and the role of extension and working with stakeholders and users, and that's really what we're trying to do with the DLN too, is working with stakeholders and users, decision makers, and that was the goal. And I think what all of the state climatologists have shared up to this point, and I think it's key to hear that for the DLN, is this peer-to-peer relationship that they're using tools that others have developed. They're sharing their information for others to learn from and use. And I honestly think that, of everything we've done with the DLN, and the one thing that I always go back to has been the peer-to-peer aspect of it. We don't need to all recreate the wheel or create the wheel. We can learn from each other and take those experiences and share them. And I think, John, you did a good job too of talking about, how we can interact with the indigenous folks as well as other decision makers. And there's a lot of opportunity there. So with that being said, I will pass it on to Russ Schumacher, a state climatologist in Colorado. And Russ, you have the floor.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And yeah, welcome on board. Welcome to the club, Baker. Look forward to meeting you in person before too long, but glad we could connect here. Okay. I think I'm sharing properly. Yeah, look okay, Brian? Okay, good. Yeah, so my name is Russ Schumacher. I serve as the state climatologist for Colorado. And I guess I'll start just with an intro to our office and our team. So we're called the Colorado Climate Center. Similar to the others here on the call, we're have an office at the land grant university, and that's a core part of kind of core to our mission as well. So we talk about our mission as threefold. So we do climate monitoring, which includes drought monitoring as well as other things. And we're the headquarters for COCORAS here. We have our own state mesonet as well, COAGMET. So we kind of have those aspects that that several of the others already shared here. Climate research, mostly applied work that's relevant to Colorado, and then climate services, of course. So we're engaging with a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of the same types of groups that the others have already pointed out, within state agencies, agriculture groups, water managers, the media, and so on and so forth, and lots of outreach and education and engagement activities. There's a picture of our team from the football field at CSU during the AASC meeting this last summer, although it's a little bit outdated now because a couple of our folks have moved on to other positions, but we'll be replacing them here soon, or replacing them as best as we can. So that's a little bit about our office. In terms of what issues we've been facing with drought over the last year in Colorado, this I think runs back to the start of the calendar year. We had a pretty good, not a huge snowpack year, but a pretty decent snowpack year, and fairly wet in areas in the spring. And then, like a lot of places, the last month or so has been really dry. And so you see at the end of the loop, we get the drought conditions on the drought monitor popping back in there. And so our office is responsible for, or at least we do the coordination of the recommendations to the drought monitor for Colorado, in consultation with the Weather Service and USDA and some others through there. And then I guess we'll let it go to the end again there. And I think one of the issues that especially in the West has become a challenge is how to incorporate the effects of rising temperatures in drought monitoring, because drought, obviously, it's first and foremost, it's not enough precipitation, but we're increasingly seeing the effects of increasing temperature on drought as well, especially across the West. And so you can see here, these are maps of the water year that just ended. So the 12 months there in the historical ranking. So most of Colorado had a top 10 warm water year. But in precipitation, it was, aside from a few specific areas, it wasn't all that remarkable. Kind of middle of the pack in terms of precipitation, a lot of areas, a few areas that were very wet, and a few areas that were quite dry. But this still sets the stage for drought. The increasing temperature tilts the odds towards water stress and limitations to water resources. So I'll highlight this with one area of one part of the state that has been particularly challenging this year, and it relates to the conversations we have with ag producers and with other stakeholders in Southeast Colorado. So highlighting southeastern Colorado here, just as a couple of drought indicators. This is the 6-month SPEI, so basically the growing season. And we see in southeast Colorado, most areas in this indicator, you'd probably put in the D1, maybe D2 category on the drought monitor based on SPEI. If we look at soil moisture, using the kind of a downscaled version of NASA's land model. Some spots look dry, but not exceptionally so. And then if we look at precipitation, this is from one station at Lamar. So the long-term average is the brown there. This year is in green. So no question it's been dry. But compared to, say, 2012, which was really the worst drought in recent times in this part of the state, was much, much drier. Or the light blue line, and you can see that was 1931 back in the Dust Bowl days. So it's not as bad, not as limited precipitation as those times, but still dry. And then how to square this with the conversations we're having with ag producers and others in that part of the state. So we've gotten a lot of pictures that look like this from that part of southeast Colorado. Now, of course, this is a dry area naturally, so it's not like this would be lush green vegetation at the end of the summer, even in a normal year. But basically, it's like everything turning to dust and nothing's growing. Hearing the reports that it's as bad as they've ever seen it. Here's a Seymour report of all the crops and pastures are suffering severely. No feed for cattle because nobody's able to grow corn. And so this has been a difficult spot for us this year, because based on the impact reports we get, probably there's no question that it's really bad, but how bad is it compared to past years, and how do we reflect that on something like the drought monitor? And others have pointed out this issue as well, of like contrasting the short-term and long-term conditions. Like this is what our biggest reservoir in Colorado, which is a little bit below average this year, but really not all that bad. 1 year can make a huge difference in these smaller reservoirs, but then there's Lake Powell downstream, which is, you need a decade or something to recover that. And so kind of, that balance between the short-term and long-term conditions. And then lastly, I'll just highlight this kind of as one, as Brian mentioned at the end of Baker's talk there, sometimes we get the opportunity to team up and work together. This was a meeting that Dave Dubois and I presented at last year, nominally on air quality in the Four Corners, but that also connects pretty closely to drought and climate more broadly. And so we got to engage with a lot of folks there, and others from the indigenous community presented about the effects of drought and climate change on traditional cultural activities. And so these are, different from maybe the kind of, ag production that a lot of times get the focus. But it's, changes in timing and abundance and distribution of plants that are culturally important, and that are seeing impacts on tribal lands as well. So I'll stop there. There's some info, on our office. So we do monthly summaries, and then we've started blogging recently on different topics. So if you're interested in those, you can check those out and subscribe to get them in your email if interested.
All right. Thank you, Russ. Do we have any questions directly for Russ in Colorado? You can unmute yourself or put in the chat.
Hey, Russ, this is Keith Lefebvre at the Navajo Regional Office of BIA in Gallup, New Mexico. So I've spent a lot of time in the Four Corners area and was wondering when are you coming back down again so I can make that trip?
Sure. Yeah. Dave, I haven't actually heard anything about when they're having this next Four Corners meeting. It usually is every year around this time of year, but I haven't heard anything about it because last year it was November. I don't know, Dave, if you're still on, if you've heard anything about that.
No, I was wondering the same question.
Yeah. But I'm trying to think if there's anything on the docket for Durango or Cortez coming up. Nothing that I can think of at the moment, but it'd be good to connect for sure. Because that's I mean, partly it's just a practical thing of it being about, well, almost as far away from our part of the state up here in Fort Collins to get down there, but I
Right,
need to
but the
get myself down
proximity
there more regularly as well.
Navajo reservation is my interest.
Got it. Yeah. But yeah, that Four Corners air quality meeting is really good because it's a again, nominally about air quality, but we covered a lot of topics much more broadly than that, and it usually seems to bounce around between like Durango or Farmington or somewhere in that area.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists and appreciate you all taking time to share with us. I do think that the state climatologists are well known. I think they all do a tremendous job. I know in my 25 years of doing what I've been doing, I've always had a strong relationship with the state climatologists around the country, and they're a go-to resource for many. And so thank you all for what you do for your states and in the region. And I do think that just through the discussions of hearing from the states, there are some things that the Drought Learning Network can really look to pair up with the states individually on doing, and I think a lot can come from not only hearing what each state is doing, but also some of the challenges. I think many of you did share where there's opportunities and how just data is being looked at. The differences of one tool versus another, or specific needs of specific types of communities, be it farming or ranching or water or air quality, like was mentioned too. So thank you to all. And with that, I'll open it up. If there's any last question for any of our state climatologists, you can unmute yourself. And if no one does that, Tanya, I will send it back to you. But we'll give it a chance if anyone has a comment or question.